companies, I think they're inauthentically hiring people just
You've
to bring their numbers.
so you've heard people say that before?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I've been in conversation with some execs, and they're like, we're low on color, we're low on color, we're low on diversity. Can you start hiring some Latinos? Can you start hiring some blacks? Can you start hiring some Asians? And I said, wait a minute. I'm like, no wonder this companies you have such high attrition. What are you guys doing to maintain and keep? Bringing in the colors, swirling the colors is not it. You're bringing people's cultures. You're bringing me as someone who loves this, who loves Típico, loves whatever. I'm charismatic. How do you accommodate that into this stoic, company that you're running?
Mi gente, dímelo, dímelo. What's good? Welcome to another episode of the Quién Tú Eres podcast, brought to you by Plural. You already know it's your boy Pavel, bringing you another special episode with another very special guest. As a reminder, on this podcast, the mission is to redefine professionalism. So we have a new guest every week to join us for a very candid conversation around their experience between professionalism and authenticity. Speaking of guests, the clip in the intro that you just heard is with this week's guest, Nancy Pineda. Before getting into the whole conversation, let me give you a quick little bio on Nancy so you have more context into who she is. So Nancy is a first-generation Dominican-American Latina, born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. She started her career in the corporate financial industry in 2003 after interning in high school at American Express. She later got hired as an executive assistant and worked her way up in her 20 years working at American Express. She held different roles, including business analyst, chief of staff, business strategy manager, and project manager. She's still in the corporate finance industry, but in 2021, she transitioned to JP Morgan Chase & Company, where she is currently a project manager in the corporate investment banking division. In her personal time outside of work, though, you can find Nancy trying out new eats at the gym, powerlifting, or dancing merengue típico, or bachata with her friends and family. Ya tú sabes, mi gente. To get a full bio, please be sure to check out the show notes or the episode description. Now that you have a bit more context into who Nancy is, let's get into this dope conversation. All right, so let's kick it off where we always start with the word authenticity. It's such a buzzword. You probably hear it so often. When you hear the word, what does it mean to you, though?
It means freedom. Freedom from that which holds you back to perform at your either best, to be yourself. But we spoke about unwinding that meaning of what happened in the past that causes you not to be your true self. So I think authenticity at the helm of it is freedom. And then that comes with being yourself, being your authentic self, being your true value, being vulnerable, finding your identity, bringing that forth.
So early on, growing up, was it easy to live in that definition?
Yes, I was very Hispanic, very Dominican. My first language was Spanish. So I felt like I was operating in my authenticity within my community because I was accepted. Then going into different realms, going into school, going into middle school, going into high school, going into the workplace, that's when I was like, wait a minute, I have color?
So tell me about school. You said middle school, high school. What was so different about those experiences compared to where you grew up?
Man, it was the beauty of that is back then, bilingual classes were bilingual classes. Nowadays, for whatever reason, they're ESL, and there's like this weird distinction of like, if you don't speak English, then you're in whatever class. But back then, we were in bilingual classes, and I was accepted within my own community of like the Dominicans, the Colombians, Puerto Ricans. I felt comfortable, but then I started seeing different shades of colors, people of different nationalities, where now you're seeing a bit of, well, there's this whole Dominicans versus Puerto Rican thing, which was ridiculous to me. But there was that strife, being treated differently because you're a different color, your hair type is different. You don't look the same. You don't have the long, straight hair, So I was like, well, wait a minute. You start kind of feeling, you start shrinking, like, hold on. So that was school for me.
And what do you say, like you were sort of like singled out, like were certain things said, or was that just like a feeling? Like, tell me about that experience.
I think it's more the treatment. You don't look the same. Your hair is not as soft and straight. You're not getting the same attention, right? Because again, I had like curly hair and it was pigtails and different whatever, or it was poofy. And it was that, ooh, okay, no, I like that one better because her hair is nicer. So
Right.
that treatment started early on. And I think you and I kind of spoke about the family makeup too. That takes a toll too on how you respond to these things. And I'm gonna take it back, but growing up, I was very shy. I was meek. I didn't speak much because I was afraid that I would look and sound silly. I
Mm,
was obviously, I grew up in a family, in a fantastic, loving home, but respect for the elders was a thing, right? Like you
yeah.
don't speak back, you don't do these things, you don't say that. And that kind of seeped into even in my career when I was in school that I would take it beyond and just be quiet, right? I love my family; they're amazing, but there's always like the aunts, the cousins, and different kind of people in your life that kind of like so when I was little, I had this amazing cousin. She was little, so obviously her mom would spruce her to say things like, she would tell her daughter like, "Oh, you're beautiful," which is fine. You tell a kid you're beautiful, whatever. But then she would come to me and say, "Well, my mom said that I'm beautiful and more beautiful than you, and you're not." And again, I was taught. And my mom is great because my mom is a neutralizer. She's like, "Listen, don't respond to that. They're just saying all these things." So, but that shaped me into like being quiet, not speaking up,
Yeah.
taking it all in. So, and I didn't know that that started taking a shape in the sense of like, okay, maybe I don't feel too pretty. I don't feel whatever. Not having the hair doesn't look pretty as the others. So going to
Mm,
school, it was like, you know, more of a weight where I'm shrinking even more. Like, let me just be quiet. Let me not respond to this. It's probably true.
yeah, and I'm curious too, because like you're experiencing these certain things, and obviously like we share that with our family. We're like, "Mom, this happened to me at school," kind of thing, and I find that the advice that our family gives us is, I mean, it varies, but they typically try to pass down their survival tactics, right? Because they want to protect us, right? And that's why they tell us
Right.
not. That's why they tell us to be quiet. That's why they tell us to focus on our work or on school and stuff like that. I'm wondering,
hmm
like, what sort of guidance did you get?
Growing up, so it was a lot of do the work. Your elders and others around you. Don't be too loud. Work harder. Work hard. And again, we can tap into this whole first gen Latina stuff, but even that, the lack of resources, it's like you're limited to what to do, who to reach out to. So we were conditioned to just work hard. But one thing my mom and my parents both actually were really good at is making sure that don't work any job, work the job that you want to be good at, right? But it was still this whole you have to work, right? There's this, they instill this,
Yeah.
I don't know if this is in your family too, but working hard at the cost of, right? This risk, this fear of like, no, you have to because you might be laid off, you might be whatever. So it's like whatever it is, just do it, keep it forever, whether you like it or not.
It kind of goes back to the like authority figure not
hmm
speaking up or against, and ultimately that authority figure sometimes is like your manager, the corporation as a whole, right? And they're like, yo, I had someone on the podcast the other day that they were literally, his manager was literally pulling his hair, telling him to cut it. He quit his job, and his mom was mad at him for quitting, right? It's this idea of like, that's it. Come on, he was just joking. Estaba relajando. No te come on, sigue trabajando. You got 401k. You got the
Yeah,
benefits. Focus
yeah.
on that. For you though, like as you start thinking about work, I'm wondering like what sort of like occupations did you see around you, as well as what did you sort of like dream towards? Like what did you want to do?
So funny enough, when I was little, I wanted to become a podiatrist, and this became a thing because when I was small, my dad would have me cut his fingernails, and it was a whole ritual. Like there were certain days towards the end of the week, he would come from work, and he called me. He had a cute name for me, and I'll say it here because it's still cute to me. But it's Pupa. So Pupa, and come here and sit. Sit. So I sit. I'm small, and here are my pigtails, and I'm here with my kit, and I would cut his big old fingernails because they were big, and I'm here digging through the thing, and I thought it was fascinating. So it became it was a connection thing between me and him. And I said, oh, this is what I'm going to become, right? I even go to high school. I go to high school, specialized to become a doctor or whatever have you. And then my older brother comes to me running one day. He goes, I went down the block and I heard that they make this and this much. You sure you want to become a podiatrist and look at other people's feet and this and that? Because in my mind, it was just like a connection between me and my dad.
You're
But I
right.
was like, man, you're right. I have to go do it to other people. I'm like, oh my gosh, it was too late. I was already in high school for it, but they had this really cool virtual enterprise business program, which I was like, let me try that. And it's funny because when I used to take the train, at that point, I would take the train to school in Brooklyn, and I would admire these women wearing these suits and the flats. Back in the day, it was
Mm,
like the cool flats. Nowadays, like, mm-mm. And I was like, man, how could you become that? Again, how can I ever become that? Or what is that kind of thing? And it's crazy how I believe in, like, sometimes you think things, you manifest things, and it's crazy how later on in life you see it. And you're
yeah.
like, it's crazy. I was little, I was looking at that, and here I am wearing it. I was looking at this, and here I am
Mm,
doing it. I admire to be sitting in that podium, and here I am speaking at it, right? And it was that kind of moment. With fast forward, I did this internship. I went to the virtual enterprise program. Did this internship through high school. Got hired by American Express, and I left. I always say I started American Express right after high school. I grew up there. People kind of say, "Wait, you were there for how long?" Yeah, well, like 20-something years. I literally grew up there.
wow.
Yes, right after high school. I think that's probably the last year that they were hiring high school interns because it became a little chaotic. I mean, you got high school kids. I was, I was fresh. I was having fun at
Right.
work when it was corporate. I was laughing too much and it was corporate. But anyway, I got hired into it, and then they kept me as an assistant, and I grew up from there, many different roles. 20 years later, and here I am.
What did it feel like for you? Like you said, transitioning from seeing the women in suits to being the woman in the suit. I'm assuming that's how you dressed up the first day. Like, were you like, "Mama, I'm like you just I
I
made it.
made it.
Nobody could tell me
Made
anything."
it. Get me my flats. Well, I went to Payless because we couldn't afford it back then. But I was like,
You went to-
get me my Payless flats or my fat coat. And I was like, yeah, I put it on. I felt like, man, I'm here. I'm actually in a big building. Imagine being this, how old, like 17, and you're in this building. It is like Lux galore, everything, the stores. Man, I was like, I made this. And then I was like, oh, I made it, but why does everyone look the same? Or why am I feeling treated the same? And here I am, this Latina, right? Dominican. One time there was this amazing VP, love her to death, but she was a very petite Russian woman. And she comes to me and she goes, Nancy, can I come to the office with me? And she had this really cool skirt, dress, whatever she had on. She goes, do I look big and fat in it? And I said, do you look what? So I said, no. I said, you look fantastic anyway. So I complimented her, but then it was like a mirror effect. I was like, if you think you look that way, I'm like, oh my God, right? So I was like, so there again, that whole notion of when I was a little girl and hey, I'm beautiful, I'm pretty, the hair, the this, the that, that crept up again. And I'm like, ooh, here we go. Here we
Yeah.
go. So yeah.
So what happened as a result? Did you start thinking? Did you start changing your appearance, how you dress, and any of those things?
Yes, because again, it goes back to that respect factor, right? And it was like, okay, well, I have to abide by the company, whatever. I have to look a certain. Not that I wasn't dressing right, but I felt even more self-conscious because the women working there were, again, it was the gym, all that stuff. I was new to the everything of that. From a traditional Dominican family where you're eating rice and beans, where you're just yourself, having fun, Típico music everywhere, right? And it's like now you're in this whole new world. You're like, oh my gosh, what is happening? And body conscious, curvy women at that time wasn't a big thing. It was like everyone was going to the gym to be very extra thin. So I was like, oh my God. So I started switching the way I looked. I wanted to look and blend in. Even my hair, I started kind of straightening it and having I don't know who styled this, but it was like my curls came up like this. My hair was like up to here. And I wanted to blend in, look as much as them, and maybe stop eating a little bit so I can kind of fit the bill.
Wow. So not even just your like appearance in the clothes. Like you started even changing your diet.
Yeah, it was. I was super self conscious. It was like, how do I fit in? Again, I wanted to be treated such just as them. And it goes back to mentality. So when I was in middle school and high school, it's like, how do I get treated like them and not ousted because you don't look like the rest? I was like, oh, I gotta be in the in group. So I have to do something to look like them and be like them. But there's only a limit, right? There's only so
Yeah.
much you can do with a curvy body. As much as you shrink
Yeah.
it, there's still gonna be things going on like, whoa, that's not proportionate.
And it's interesting too. Like you said, you started straightening your hair. So when you first went in there, you went in with curly hair.
Actually, from high school, I started straightening my hair. It was a thing. It was a
In
thing
high
when I
school.
was little. It was a thing of like, this is a otro pelo malo, pelo what? Well, it wasn't crazy bad, but it was,
Right.
as they say, it was just curly, and it was just sometimes unmanageable. So it was like, let's start straightening the thing. So again, it goes back to when I had my friends, long, amazing, and the
Right.
hair and all this stuff, and I'm like, I have to look like them to fit in and be cool like them. So it was already a thing. I was already conditioned by it, but maybe the styling was a little like, okay, let me just primp it up a little bit, look more corporate to fit
Yeah.
in.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. And it's interesting too, like even like the diet or the clothes, it's not like in that meeting or that conversation someone told you like you need to go change, right? But we just like enter a room and we just look around and we just tell ourselves that we need to change, right? Like it's just like
Right.
to your point, like we want to fit in, we want to be accepted. Well, we see everyone else and they've probably been here for 10 years. They're VPs. They have proven themselves to be successful. So if I want to be successful, I need to be like them. Like that's the internal dialogue that we do in a matter of like 2 minutes as soon as we walk in a room.
That's crazy. And that's so true because it was that internal voice, people looking at you a certain way, or even just like comments. Like comments
Yeah.
also work themselves, kind of like, oh yeah, I liked your hair when it was like this, or yeah, your hair looks nicer this way, or those pants are a little whatever, or wait, what size are you? Kind of thing. Those I got in all of it, and
Yeah,
uh,
what sort of comments did people say? What size are those?
what size are you?
Why would somebody
Where
ask
did
that though?
because they weren't understanding how that was a larger part versus the top part was smaller. So
So people literally ask you like what size your pants are.
people de confianza, right, at work would be like, so wait, so what is that, like a 10? What is that like? What, so how is that this, and maybe it wasn't malintended. Maybe it was just like, but I was getting it from different, especially outside of the culture, because they weren't understanding this proportion that there was. And I said, yeah, it's a little tough. And I'd always make it into a joke, and I'm always joking around. If you know me well, I'm like, yeah, it's I always have an issue with pants. It's just the thunder thighs or whatever that I have. It's the pants not conforming to my body. So I'd make everything into a joke, but that takes a toll. It did take a toll.
My mom does literally the same thing. She would turn anything into a joke. It's like, and I don't know if this is for you, but for her, it's her defense mechanism.
I think so too. It's that, and honestly, I just enjoy life. I've come to a point. Well, I've always been one that I love to laugh, but I really just enjoy life. And I tell people, I'm like, listen, don't even invite me to your funeral or nothing because I will find something that I will
Yes,
remember.
yes.
And we're here, like in the middle of a funeral. I was at my grandpa's funeral, matter of fact, tears and all. And this woman came up to the casket, and I don't know what she said. And my dad, we're the worst. My dad, my brother, I just start like snickering and laughing in the middle of this, my grandpa's funeral. But I just always find joy, either humor, obviously tasteful, right? Because hopefully not the wrong time, but
Sure.
I'm always constantly laughing. My best friend tells me, Nancy, I don't know what it is, but you have this reservoir of memories. I can sit there and just start laughing. Like, do you remember this happening? And you felt this way, and this and that. I'm simple in that way. I just love laughter.
My mom is the exact same way. Don't invite her to a funeral. She will find something funny to say about something. To your point, in a tasteful way. Um, that's interesting. So what are some other things that stood out to you? And in you like reminiscing, I'm wondering like was it all about appearance or were people also making comments or giving you feedback around maybe in the tone of how you say things or things like that, like personality wise?
See, that's another animal too, right? Then there comes the personality side. You're too charismatic, you're laughing too much, you're too
Too
nice,
charismatic,
too charismatic. I've heard that. Too jovial, too nice.
too
Uh,
nice.
oh yeah, oh yeah. I've gotten that. You're too nice. Don't be naive. Which, in essence, it made sense to me because I'm like, I get it. I took the Strength Finder, Gallup Strength Finder study. And it kind of tells you the top five strengths. And it's funny because my top one is empathy. And I'm one that I care too much. I get invested. And then you got the nice part. Then you have the charismatic me being me part. And one advice that I got is like, you're too nice. You're too good to people. Not everyone is safe. Don't be naive. And it was just a bit of a wake up call. But going back to your question about, how that has shown up, it was the physical part. It's also how you're treated. It's also being kind of looked upon when promotions came around, not being considered when you're sitting at the table, right? Your voice. But that also comes internally, right? So it's introspective because I have to see, okay, so why didn't I speak up? Why didn't I say something? What can I do to also, because there's the outside factor, but then there's the factor where I have a voice. What do I do to change that? Right. to kind of not combat that, but what can I do to kind of bring about change to that which is making me feel small. And there's that introspection. I started learning like, okay, I cannot change the world. I can't change people's mindsets. I can't change their ideals, but I can change the way that I react to it. And that was just clicking. I think it was in my early, I'm in my 30s, in my early 30s. I just had a whole like, okay, hold on a second. Like, who am I? And just some background. I was married once. I got married in my late 20s, and you're young, going from. I was taught to go from my house to the other house, meaning like you leave. Like mom said, "Te me vas de aquí, casa con traje blanco," right? So very ingrained. So I was that. I was really into church, which I still am, but I was very rigid and came from a strong background where I got into a relationship. It was just I thought the glitz and glam, the positions in church, all that stuff, when it comes to character and people being human, that supersedes the whole like you're in church and the position. So unfortunately, that didn't work out. So in the midst of that breakup, that divorce, I was like, yo, what is going on? Who am I? And one
Like
thing I discovered,
you didn't even recognize yourself almost.
when you grow up in a certain, around your community, you're that, right? You're that, you're conditioned that you're that. Oh, tú eres así, porque tú eres así. When I moved out of my house, got married, the situation happened where I got the divorce. I was like, yo, what? So I started seeing in me the things that I am. I'm a very charismatic person. I'm loving, I care, the way that I operate, the way that I am in my household, even my own community is like, yo, what happened? You changed, or that's not you kind of thing. So I always tell, yeah, folks around me, like, you wait till you leave your nest, right? Wait till you leave what's your comfort zone. You'll start noticing, man, who am I? Oh, I do like
Yeah.
chocolate. Oh, I do like red wine. I do like this. I don't like Moscato too much. It's too sweet. But around my family, they love those sweet things. It's those kind of things where I start identifying, like, who am I? So it was a great sort of introspection of like, what is going on here? And that time after that divorce allowed me to focus on me versus letting people cast their judgments and shape me through their judgments, their expectations too, right? And I started whisking away. I'm like, wait a minute. So it was an era of awareness, self-awareness, identifying who I am, being able to be comfortable with who I am around my community of people that are used to seeing me a certain way. And that seeped into work heavily, because that's when I was like, wait a minute, aquí se acabó esto.
Yeah.
O me aceptan o no me aceptan. So, a little bit from my divorce, I just loved, I admired Halle Berry so much until this day. And for some reason, and again, one of those things where you see something and then later on you're like, dang, how did I
Right.
get there? And I loved her so much, my hair, this and that. And somehow I got tired of the whole straightening the thing and the that and the whatever. I'm like, let me just start chopping over my bob to this. And I'm like, whoop, pixie. I'm like, it works out. It's easier. I wake up and it's like, done.
So that's one of the first things you did to sort of maybe start this new identity where you feel very comfortable in yourself.
A little bit of that started around towards the end of my marriage. And I'll emphasize that because even that was resisted. Well, you don't look beautiful anymore, or you're not, pretty to me anymore. And that was tough. That was tough. But I said, I'm finding that I feel good. And I also, it's easy for me to maintain. I don't have to pay $50 at the hair salon, Fabel. Every single week, I'm sure your mom, your cousins,
Yeah.
there's nothing, I have nothing against it. But I was like, I'm tired of spending my Saturday 7 hours in a salon. So I'm like, this thing is going. It was more functionality and then became, for me at least, beauty. But
That's an
um,
interesting example. That's an interesting example though that you shared around you making a decision for you versus someone else,
that's tough.
right?
That's
Because
tough.
you made a decision for you, but someone else is telling you that in some way there's some sort of resistance. Yet you're like, yeah, but I didn't do this for you. I did this for me, and
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 that's
that's very
tough.
different compared to everything you've done, previously. Like that's a big step.
That is an unraveling, right? Again, growing up, respecting the elders, respecting others' opinions, being quiet, being submissive, being etc. It literally was like a wake up call of like, and I think I learned that honestly through corporate. So I gotta give a lot of credit to Amex and amazing leaders and even female leaders who taught me how to like find my voice, find your leadership voice. I'm an executive coach who I love so much. Um, Sean, yeah, I've got a coach. I meet with him every other Friday. Same thing. We were working together, unraveling like what is going on. Why can't you speak up in a table full of honestly white women? White women.
Yeah.
I had interesting bosses. I had amazing bosses throughout, but then I had some like very interesting ones, and one thing I found is that working for white women, even younger, older, whatever, I always tensed up around. I didn't know what to say. I felt like I sounded silly. Even
Mhm.
talking, I feel like I sounded stupid because here comes this Dominican girl. And I always say, listen, my first language was Spanish. If I say something a little silly, like my good friend says, I'm smart in Spanish, trust me. So
Like you felt the need to pre-qualify that every time.
every time. And it could be like an update, it could be just simple conversations. I was trying to find big words to sound just as, right?
Oh my god, me
Um,
too.
I mean, I was like, and the thing is, it's crazy because nowadays, I think that conditioning transition. My best friend tells me, Nance, when people ask you, "What are you?" Because I always get the wait. So what are you? Black with white mix? No, no, no. You're from the islands, or whatever. They're not only asking, "What are you?" like nationality. They're asking because you talk so corporate. You talk so corporate. I'm like, what? I'm like, I do. I started realizing, like, I think I do. I think it was the conditioning of all of that, training myself to sound just as smart, but it just became a thing that, anyway, it was.
You said your executive coach helped you not only make you self-aware in the fact why is this so bothersome to you, but also helped you get over it. Like what helped you get over that? No, I belong in this room and I have a voice and they hired me for my voice. Let me give my voice. Like what got you there?
One, with my executive coach, we started unpacking, like, going back to childhood, going back to the scenario of when I was told, you're not good enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not this enough. So he goes, there's something linked to that. And I was like, no, because he'd asked me a question about my childhood. I'm like, why is he asking me all these questions? And then it made sense. He said, no, there's linkage to all of that, right? The fact that you're Hispanic, first generation Latina, the fact that you lack of resources, not being able to, go to school as easy as someone else, your counterpart from a different color, not being able to go to the same school as them because you don't have the. So all that took apart, and even the culture, especially the women, right? And at least in my house, Dominican women is like, you're supposed to be cooking, you're supposed to be this, and if you're married, you're supposed to do all these things, get up before your husband, all these things. Not to say that it's not wrong, but it was just that shaped me, and I didn't know that was so ingrained and so interweaved into who I am that I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. And then the being quiet. And it's funny because my friends nowadays, like, how were you shy? There's no absolute, definitely shy talking. I felt like I sounded silly. Um, so we unpacked and unraveled that, literally going back to that. And I said, man, as we were talking to it, he started kind of just then became the uncovering of the insecurity. My insecurities, those we call them the gremlins when they would creep up saying, oh no, you're too Hispanic for that white person next to you. So he started teaching me on how to bring awareness to that and say, hold on a second, giving myself value, growing, and then even going to the divorce, finding value in that. And kudos to those women, right? Who can get over certain things, who can go through such tough moments and still perform. Let me tell you something. When I was going through that divorce, it was tough. I was doing my schooling. I was in my last year, I think, of undergrad. I was in the honor program. I was doing all these things, but I kept that stuff aside. My friends in school didn't even know I was going through a divorce until way later that I told them about it. But I was like, I have to do this. I have to achieve. And I was finding my identity even throughout that. And he taught me, my coach, who you are even outside of your family. Folks around you may see you and say, hey, what's going on? It goes back to that notion of like, wait, you didn't grow up this way. Who are you? And it was uncovering and linking all of that to it. I said, you know what, Sean? Yeah, you know what? So it was like the aha moments, and there was many aha moments. And him and I have been working together for since I think 2016. Literally every Friday we're talking. And he's a white man. He goes, listen, I get it. As a white man, I might not understand, but let me tell you, he has a background in working with different families and I think social servicing. So his background is amazing. So him speaking to someone me, like me, of color, I learned so much from his viewpoint. He sees me from my viewpoint. And sometimes he says, Nance, tap into that white man mentality. You think they care? you think the way you overthink of, let me apply for this job, or if I apply for this job and then I can't say no. I have to be there and I have to be married to that job for so many years. And he goes, as a white man, I get up in the morning. I'm like, I'm tired of this. I'm bored of this. I'm gonna apply. Put your emotions aside. Put your empathy aside. So anyway,
What would a
but
white man? What would a white man do?
it's that. It's the what would Jesus do, but what would a white man do? So he's taught me a lot along the way of like how to, just see culture for what it is, the beauty of culture, but then seeing myself out of that, the identity. It's like here you are, a glop of that, but this is you, right? You have your identity. So it was kind of pulling me away. Not that I'm not a culture, love culture. I love Típico. I'm Dominican to the core with a little bit of Cuban, but it's understanding like you are a person. You are you. You have your ideals, you have your taste, your palate. It doesn't always have to be influenced by the outside world. So it's been a transition since literally 2016. And I just had many aha moments. I was like, forget this. I go to interviews on myself, obviously professional, but short hair, I've got my multiple piercings. I just show up as myself. And he taught me along the way how to find my voice, how to find my executive voice, how to take my, especially how to take my life back.
So, were you nervous going into work as this new person, if you will? Like, oh my God, what are they gonna think when I wear these piercings, as you mentioned, or what are they gonna think of a woman with short hair? Is that
Oh, yeah.
unprofessional? You know what I mean? Like, what sort of stories were you making up in your head around like, oh, they're gonna say this, and that?
Oh my gosh. Let me tell you about that. Yes, there was a lot of overthinking, but man, did it feel good when I was going through this transition. I'll tell you this, I'm gonna be transparent, but when I was, and this happened when I was at Amex, but when I started getting, cutting my hair short, I was like, no, it's not short enough. I'd go through my lunch breaks on Fridays. There was about of a month where, like, within a few weeks span, my hair went from here to here to here to here, and I was being bold with it. And I would come back from lunches all too, and my colleagues who were amazing, like, what happened, right? What's going on here? And that's not. I went for lunch break, just needed to trim, and I went for the Dominican trim that goes from here to like here, and so, but honestly, a sense of boldness and confidence just awoke in me, Pavel. It really, I was just tired. There comes to a point where it's like, oh, man, I'm just tired of being pretty. So I'm just tired that I can't do that. I'm just as female at the core of this. I'm just as liable and capable and studied, right? I went for my undergrad. Not only did I go for my undergrad, I went straight to get to my MBA. Then I got all these certifications. I'm like, I'm just as certified. Like, why can't I? Why not? So I was tired. I was tired of this having to look and feel the same. My body will never be looking like that. And even if I shrunk, and at one point I did lose a lot of weight, my mom was like, ¿Y qué te pasa? ¿Que tú te estás muriendo? Que te ves tan lánguida, and I'm like, Mom, like, I'm here like, oh, but I look prettier, right? But I felt terrible, and I was like, you forget that, like, tired of the voices, tired of the external factors trying to shape me into who they wanted me to be. So I just started becoming bold. It was just a transition. I can't really tell you like there was like a one moment. It was just those many moments with the help of Sean, my executive coach, and then just like transitioning in life. That was like, forget this. And once
Yeah.
you start working in security, you start noticing that you start seeing people differently. You start seeing people that when they speak, they're speaking out of their insecurity. They're speaking out of their expectations. So,
So
meaning
you started seeing yourself in them, like, oh, they're still where I was back then.
they're still where I was, or they're just not going to see me where I am because their mind is reframed to seeing, like, for example, a woman is beautiful if she's got long hair, straight hair. That's okay. That's your thinking. It's like when they say, para lo gustos o colores, right? So imagine we all like the same man. We can't be only married to that same man. Everybody has their own taste, has their own likes. So I started seeing the world and people like that. Like, I get it. Thank you. And I respect your comment, but I'm still, this is who I am. And if you don't like it, it's okay because someone else will. If you
Yeah.
like my skill sets, that's fine too. If I'm not equipped for your job, I don't look or fit the par for this position, then it wasn't for me. So I started looking at the world, and that was a self-awareness, again, exercise that we kept doing. Is like, remove yourself from that, see from the outside, see what's going on over there. So when I would get the comments, short hair, the this, you don't look pretty, whatever, or you're not good at, or going for endless interviews for different roles and not being looked at, I'm like, I'm just not equipped for it. I get it. I don't fit the bill. I don't fit your liking. That's okay.
That's something that I actually tell people often. I often get the question, because like we said earlier, naturally we all just want to fit in some sort of space, right? So people are often like, well, I don't want to be my most authentic self at work because I'm scared that like I won't be accepted. And I tell people like the rooms where people aren't accepting you, like you probably don't want to be there anyway,
Mm.
right? But that's a scary idea. This idea of like not everyone will accept me. Meanwhile, the places that will accept you, you're probably going to be happier there, right? But it's terrifying. It's really, really scary. Yeah, that's a question that I get often.
Being authentic and not being able to fit in. And you know something, when I was going through this exercise with my coach, and just in life, just this realization of it, a lot of the positions that I had where I was not happy is because I didn't bring my authentic self. I brought this version of me, right, where I thought it was gonna be digestible. Let me look prim and proper. Let me look very white. Let me
Right.
take off my this. Let me whatever. Let me just comb it this way so it looks proper. So I'm giving them, right, it's on me. I'm giving them this facade of this person that they're gonna have and accept. And then the next day I come and I'm like, all right, piercings. All right, here I am. They're like, hold up,
Yeah.
hold up. Where's the Nancy that we interviewed, right? So
Right.
it was on me. I started realizing this is why authenticity is so important, because if you show up like you're not you, that inauthentic you, they're going to be expecting that person that you came up with. So this is why,
Every day.
every day, because it's not like I'm going to come here to, that's tough. It's
Yeah.
tough not being yourself. And I went through that through many years, right? I
You got to
was
put
first,
on you got to put on that performance every day.
oh my gosh. And how heavy is that being someone that you're not?
Yeah. It's time
Being,
consuming too.
it's time consuming, it's expensive, it's
Yeah.
tiring, it's exhausting. You come home, it's like you take off your whole clothes, you take off your whole stuff. Like, oh, right here you are, you're listening to Típico, right? All this stuff. That was me, right? And then it's like, oh, okay, wait, let me put on my, Carrie Underwood, let me whatever, spruce myself up. I'm at work, blah, blah, nothing wrong. I love her music. But it was like that transition of like, whew, it was
Yeah.
heavy.
I want to know what impact you think it had on your career.
The inauthentic part.
No, the authentic part. So like when you
Uh,
stopped faking it and you started being yourself, like what sort of impact do you think it had on your career?
People started accepting me for who I am. The people who needed to the right people who I needed to be around accepted me for who I am, because I'm bringing who I am to the table. And I'll tell you this: the funny part is I've been to many interviews, right? So I have an MBA in managerial analytics and business administration, and I say this because I tend to not look the part for many people. And I've been to interviews where literally they'll turn the camera and I'm just there waiting, obviously, for the questions. They start asking me questions about project management and all this stuff. So I give them a whole lowdown of waterfall methodologies, of agile framework, give them answer questions on how to deal with scope creep, how to deal with gold plating, all these things that they thought I could not answer. And literally, the woman, one of them, like put her glasses back and she looks at me in the camera. She goes, wait, so hold on, how do I put everybody? So I knew I had gotten the stigma of like, all right, let me see this girl. Pick the hair. She probably looks like she's from the Bronx to the Bronx. All right, whatever. And literally that same person was like, are you available tomorrow to meet with the hiring leader? I'm like, yeah. I meet with the hiring leader. The hiring leader is a white woman. She's in a big giant conference room. I'm in Zoom, obviously. Again, I get the same look. She kind of looks off. She goes, okay, so she's reading through the thing, literally looking down the whole time. She starts asking me questions about my background, about specific, because the job was about project management. And I give her a whole lowdown, a breakdown. So many things. She was like an SVP, whatever she was. And literally the same thing. Puts her glasses up, looks at like the Zoom couldn't be that close. It's almost like she wanted to touch me through the screen. Like, hold up, hold on, hold on. So she puts her glasses up and she goes, hold on a second. I think I have a 9:30. Are you available for another? I have more questions for you. And it was so much so that she had to invite me physically into her office so that she could see me. And it was the same experience. Showed up. I had my piercings. I had and I'm a hoop guy. I love hoops. Nice hoops, a little bit more, cooler. Came up, my authentic self, and it was caused such a cognitive dissonance. He was like, "Wait a minute, this is what you look like, but your mouth is saying this, and your credentials saying this." And honestly, I revel and I thrive in that, because I'm like, let me prove you wrong. Just because I look like this, I speak like this, because I listen to Típico, doesn't mean that I don't have a skill set to this, that, and the other. And man, is that freeing.
Is it easier or more difficult the higher you go? Because I would assume that, some people say, oh, well, the higher I go, the more shots that I can call for myself kind of thing. Yet there's probably a lot more to lose and a lot more eyeballs on you as well. So I'm curious, is it easier or harder the higher you go up?
It's been getting a little tougher. I know there's this whole
Interesting.
D&I movement. It's been getting tougher in a sense because you have to keep thriving through and saying, this is me. It's like when you're pushing through a crowd, like, hold up, excuse me, excuse me, excuse me. It feels like that. It starts getting very crowded. And people kind of like, because they already have a certain way of thinking, of doing. Although there's a lot of this D&I movement going on, a lot of corporate. And yes, as they're saying, it's your time, Latin women of color, etc. It is, but a lot of these companies are still not understanding what it is to bring a culture. There's this whole, again, I call it the DE&A movement, right? It's diversity, equity, and assimilation, where you're asked to come in and come perform as how we want you, right? So I've heard of companies where, and I've been in conversations where leaders are like, hey, we're low on Latinos. Can somebody hire? We're numbers. So companies, I think they're inauthentically hiring people just to bring their numbers.
So you've heard people say that before?
Oh yeah, I've been in conversation with some execs, and they're like, we're low on color. We're low on color. We're low on diversity. Can you start hiring some Latinos? Can you start hiring some Blacks? Can you start hiring some Asians? And I said, wait a minute. I'm like, no wonder this companies, you have such high attrition. What are you guys doing to maintain and keep? Bringing in the colors, swirling the colors is not it. You're bringing people's cultures. You're bringing me as someone who loves this, who loves Típico, loves whatever. I'm charismatic. How do you accommodate that into this stoic, company that you're running?
Yeah.
And then attrition is off the roof. And there's this whole situation. Well, how come we can't keep retention rate? Well,
that wasn't even part of the plan. You just wanted to bring them in.
Want to bring them in. So, and I've been at the table where that conversation has ensued. And I said, well, if that's the way that you're going, that's the way that you're not flowing. That's the way that you're going to go straight down, right? That's the way your entire company's going to plummet. It looks cute in numbers. It looks great. You have the little colors here and there, especially on the C-suites. It starts getting a little tighter. But it's tough because it gets tougher because you have to now continue being yourself, trying to fit in this culture that's already kind of standardized.
Well, that's a really interesting point around this idea of like moving up the corporate ladder, quote unquote. And when companies share diversity numbers, like that's for the whole company. But as you move up, it's less and less diverse. So this idea of like us wanting to fit in, well, that in theory becomes harder and harder because it's more and more looking like white men as you go up, right? Whereas like if you're in an entry level role, maybe there's some people that look like you. Maybe there's some people where you're like, all right, I can see myself in that person, but like it's just an interesting like visual I haven't thought about till now.
Well, because they're running shop.
Right.
It's for them. It's running.
Those are the decision makers.
The decision makers. Hiring entry level folks, you're performing to what they want. Again, I go into the simulation connotation, right? The come here and be that. Come here, we'll accept you as your color, but now you're going to perform for me. People in management levels, they're running shop. So of course they don't want, not that they don't want, but it's challenging to bring someone of color because here you are accepting cultures, and you're like, hold on a minute. So yeah, it's easy to bring them in because they're performing for you. But as a manager, you're running shop. You don't want somebody, it's tough to have someone of color, someone of diverse background bring those ideals where it's challenging you. It's challenging, your position. Oh yeah.
Here you are saying that it's more difficult. So why do you keep doing it? What inspires you today? What empowers you to continue being your most authentic self despite these things that we just discussed?
I'm a trailblazer. I love being a trendsetter, trailblazer wherever I can. And then bringing those with me, bringing those women with me, those men too, colored men as well. I was there when I was like, how do I do that? How do I wear those shoes? Like seeing the women in their train, right? How can I do that? My little fingers, right? And here I am how could I not bring others with me? And if it takes, going through the criticism, going through the naysayers, going through the being put aside so they can see that they can do that, I don't mind taking the helm.
Was good. That wraps up another episode of the Quién Tú Eres podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, please do us a favor, like, share, comment. If you're wherever you are listening, if there's an option to leave a rating and a review, please do so. It will be much appreciated because the way that we're going to redefine professionalism is by ensuring that these stories and experiences get heard by as many people as possible. We are creating empathy and awareness with every experience that gets heard. Thank you and see you next time.